History of cocoa and chocolate. The history of the emergence of chocolate today is not a mystery. It began with the appearance of cocoa on Earth. Uncultivated cocoa grew and grows in a warm climate, at about 40 degrees north and south latitude. This is the coast of Mexico, Central and South America. Now there are cocoa plantations in Africa and on some islands of Asia, but also at the same latitude. This is the so-called chocolate belt. Cocoa is a tree up to 12 meters high, which blooms and bears fruit all year round. Accordingly, the harvest on plantations is also harvested by hand, choosing ripe fruits. True, now there are already machines for harvesting cocoa, but manual collection is still considered the best. Ripe fruits come in a variety of colors: burgundy, orange, dark green, depending on the variety, reach 30 centimeters in length and weigh up to 500 grams. There are up to 50 beans inside the fruit. To get 1 kilogram of chocolate, you need about 900 beans, and for 1 kilogram of grated cocoa, about 1,200 cocoa beans. For the first time, a person began to specially cultivate cocoa in what is now Peru. Archaeologists dug up vessels with traces of theobromine inside, which means that cocoa was stored there. Thus, it is believed that it was used as early as the 18th century BC. However, then it was not cocoa beans that were used, but the sweet pulp of the fruit, from which a kind of home brew is still prepared in tropical countries. From the history of the origin of chocolate, it is known that the Aztec and Mayan tribes were the first who began to regularly use it in the form of a bitter, intoxicating drink. The Aztecs also made a drink from cocoa, but it tasted completely different from what we drink now. It was not sweet, but with the addition of spices. It consisted of water, cocoa, vanilla, hot pepper and salt, and only noble people could drink it. The history of hot chocolate. In short, the history of the emergence of chocolate in the Old World began only after the conquest of America. The people of Cortez in the treasury of Montezuma II, the last leader of the Aztecs, found cocoa beans that were collected from the population as taxes. Then the Spaniards learned about the fruits and drink from the Aztecs, and already in the middle of the 16th century, this information was included in books about the New World. Of the Europeans, Christopher Columbus was the first to try chocolate in 1502 and even brought the beans home. But then no attention was paid to them, because Columbus himself did not like chocolate. The second attempt to accustom Europeans to cocoa was successful. The conquistadors of General Hernán Cortés in 1519 tried it, brought the miracle beans to Europe and presented a drink that had never been seen before at the Spanish court. Cocoa liked it, and the enterprising conqueror of the New World organized a trade in it from his plantation in America. The history of hot chocolate says that at first a very expensive product was inaccessible to most, but over time, many townspeople began to afford buying, if not the cocoa beans themselves, then the waste from their production, from which the cocoa shell drink was made, similar to cocoa, but more liquid. That the cocoa drink itself was becoming more and more popular. Its composition has also changed over the decades. Quite quickly, Europeans abandoned the use of pepper and strong spices, began to add more sugar or honey, and vanilla was used for flavor. In relatively cold Europe, cocoa began to be heated, which also influenced the taste preferences of the Spaniards, Italians and French. Chocolate came to the territory of the German states from Italy, and since 1621, Spain's monopoly on this product completely ceased to operate. Cocoa beans appeared on the wholesale markets of Holland and throughout the continent. At retail, cocoa was sold in pressed slabs, from which the merchant broke off a piece of the desired weight. It is known from the history of hot chocolate that it was prepared in a very simple way. Cocoa was heated in a special vessel, sugar and water were added to it and poured into cups. At the beginning of the 18th century in Great Britain, they tried to use milk instead of water and got a softer and tastier drink than the one prepared with water. Following the example of the British, milk was also used in other countries in the preparation of cocoa, and this soon became commonplace. Until the 19th century, cocoa beans were used only to make a drink, grinding them and brewing them. A drink made from cocoa powder was cheaper than the former from cocoa beans, and from that time cocoa began to spread to all segments of the population. In the middle of the 16th century, cocoa began to be transported to Europe, but because of the long and dangerous road, it was very expensive and was available only to courtiers in Madrid. It was still drunk without sugar, but with spices, with vanilla and cinnamon. It wasn't until the next century that sugar was added to cocoa, and the drink became much more popular after that. For example, at the court of the French King Louis XIV, hot cocoa, liquid chocolate, was considered a love potion. And when did the first solid chocolate appear, and to whom does the world owe this invention? As for the history of the creation of such chocolate, it dates back to 1828, when the Dutch chemist Conrad van Houten came up with the idea of adding cocoa butter to cocoa powder. And 20 years later, in Germany, they made up the classic recipe for solid chocolate, which is used to this day. Cocoa butter, sugar and vanilla are added to grated cocoa. The degree of bitterness of the chocolate depends on the amount of cocoa butter added. With the addition of 30% cocoa butter, milk chocolate bars are made, and with higher numbers, bitter. With the increasing demand for dark chocolate with a high cocoa content, many manufacturers indicate the percentage of its content on the packaging. It is believed that in 1847 the first chocolate in the form of a bar appeared at the English confectionery factory J.S. Fry and Sons. The history of milk chocolate began in 1875, when Daniel Peter from Vevey added powdered milk to chocolate ingredients. Nowadays, chocolate for food is usually divided into white, milk and bitter. White chocolate is made from cocoa butter, sugar, filmy milk powder and vanillin without the addition of cocoa powder, so it is creamy in color, white, and does not contain theobromine. Milk chocolate is made from grated cocoa, cocoa butter, powdered sugar and milk powder. Dark, bitter chocolate is made from grated cocoa, powdered sugar and cocoa butter. By changing the ratio between powdered sugar and grated cocoa, you can change the taste of the resulting chocolate, from bitter to sweet. The more grated cocoa in chocolate, the more bitter taste and brighter aroma chocolate has. You are on the EasyFood channel. We make it easy and fun. Subscribe and stay with us. Don't miss the following videos.